Hello and welcome to our second session of CMCE. Today we're going to be looking at sales and marketing within ConnectWise Manage. So for the first half of this presentation, I'm going to be taking a look at the marketing module and some of the features in there that we think you might be able to take advantage of. Then we're going to go on a 10-minute break and then come back with Mitchell Rollo, who's going to be looking at the sales module specifically for the remaining hour. So on our agenda for this first hour, for this first session, we're going to be talking about all the marketing items within the marketing module, specifically our marketing campaigns, which are really just records of our marketing efforts that we can tie in other items within Manage to, other records. Within campaigns, we have the ability to give them some sort of classification. So in this case, a type and subtype that we can assign. This allows us, similar to ticket categorizations, to report on them a little more effectively and see how many campaigns we have of which type and maybe which are the most successful. Now for campaign type and subtype, this could be something like an email campaign, and it could have a subtype of a particular trade show that you went to, but there are tons of ways to set this up, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. We're also going to be looking into return on investment. So tying in opportunities with our marketing efforts to see really how much money is coming in, how much revenue are we winning compared to the effort that went into getting this sale. So that can be really beneficial for us when strategizing for future marketing efforts. Then we'll get into the communications manager, which is going to be really our email blast central. It's a way for us to reach out to our contacts, and we're going to review some of the ways to do that most effectively and efficiently within Manage. Within the Communications Manager, we have the ability to set up groups, which is really just a way of taking a subset of companies and contacts and placing them in a group to target marketing material to them, target emails to them. We'll kind of go over how these are set up and how groups can be managed within ConnectWise Manage. And then, as I mentioned, email blasts. That's the primary purpose of the Communications Manager. We're able to go in, select a group, or just pull from all of our existing contacts and send out an email targeted for them. And it's a really, really efficient process, an easier way for us to reach out to the right people at the right time and en masse. So before we get into all of that, I did want to go over some exam preparation, reviewing our last session with Charlie. So all of the following statements about company statuses are true except which? They can be changed on the company record, they can apply or cancel open tracks, the name of the status can be customized, or they can include notification messages. Which one of these is not true? Okay, it looks like nearly everyone has answered, and we seem a little bit split, but no worries. Luckily for this one, I do have an example image. So they cannot be changed from the company record. And by the company record, we just mean the main company screen. The trick here is that you actually have to go into the company finance screen to change the company status. Now remember, company status is extremely important, and almost even more so than a ticket status, because it can indicate their financial standing. A company status can place someone on credit hold. It can prevent time from being entered on their tickets. So that's why we essentially tuck it away into the company finance screen to make sure that only people with the appropriate elevated permissions can make this change. For the other items that we weren't totally sure of, you can apply and cancel open tracks from a status, which is extremely helpful if we think about some sort of active status where we might want to cancel some marketing tracks, or a credit hold status that might need a track applied to move them through collections. So as you can see down here, track options, cancel all open tracks down here, and then attach a new track when this type is assigned, when this status is assigned. Then as for being able to customize the name, you can see up here this description field. It can be whatever you need for your company, so your internal communication, how you speak about companies, that can be reflected in the name of your statuses. And then lastly, the notification messages. We have a generic notification message here that we can include saying something about active companies. If we so choose, or if we need, we can actually select this custom note down here as well. This option allows us to add an additional notification message that's set on the company record, so the company finance screen. It allows us to not only just say that they're on credit hold, but say for this particular customer, maybe we're looking for this piece of information. So that can be really handy as well. Another exam prep question. Which field is used to determine where a company stands in the sales process? So not finance, but sales. Is this that company's status, company type, market, or would this be handled by a custom field? Give you guys a couple minutes to get your answers in there. Okay, everyone was pretty quick with that one, but there is still some confusion. So the one that we just reviewed was company status, which that can tell us a little bit about their financial standing. We could use that to show that they're on credit hold. We could use that to show that they're an active customer and we should be providing service. Now, where a company stands in the sales process is a little different, and that's indicated by the company type. Now, the way that I like to remember company type is that a vendor can be a type of company. That has nothing to do with whether or not we service them. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're in good standing with us. It's indicating that they are one of our vendors, and we send purchase orders to them, for example. So company type, there are a lot of options as well in addition to vendor, but we have lead, unknown, not a fit, suspect, prospect, and client. So all of these items, it shows us really where they are in the sales process. It's a nice way to say, hey, this person, we worked with this company, we're keeping them in our records, but they're actually not a fit for the services that we offer. So we can put them in that company type, and then we can have a company status of inactive or not a customer to ensure that no time is entered on their tickets. But this is more of our indication. So as we get into marketing and sales, I did want to take a moment to go over the ConnectWise lifecycle flow, just because I know for a lot of the partners that I've spoken with, marketing and sales isn't really a focus, at least not a focus within the setup of your managed environment. So that may not be true for you, but if it is not, we like to mention this as kind of the initial point. This is the initial point of contact with any potential companies and contacts that you could be importing into your managed database. You're likely sending them emails, you're likely trying to work on leads, making cold calls. If we can shift our focus to tracking that within Manage, it actually leads into a much easier lifecycle flow later on. If we're tracking all of the communication, it's more likely that our companies are going to have more accurate information, their type and their status is going to be up to date. And once we move that marketing effort into a sale, into an opportunity, the minute products are assigned to that opportunity, we have so much potential for easily converting into other records later on. Not to mention all of the information that we put into our marketing efforts is being tracked within Manage, meaning that we can report on it. So if you're already using Manage, you're likely already taking great advantage of the service board, maybe project board as well, and invoicing. But leaning into those marketing efforts can help you be a little bit more strategic, especially if you are a smaller company, with how you spend your time trying to get new clients. Starting off with a business case, we have Nancy, our marketing manager. So Nancy's company has started to broaden their marketing efforts, and they're seeing an influx of interest. The problem is that while more sales are getting closed during their marketing review, they're realizing they have no idea which marketing efforts are actually bringing these customers in. So they're sort of flying blind, just doing a lot of work and getting a good return, but they're not sure what work is truly benefiting them. So what should Nancy implement to better track this marketing information? And if you're thinking marketing campaign, you would be right. Like I mentioned in our agenda, the marketing campaign is our record of our marketing effort that we can tie other records to. It essentially collects all of the information, all of the activity going around this particular marketing effort so that we can track it and really see at the end of the day how beneficial was it, how much buzz was created, and how much work went into it. So our marketing campaign screen is within our marketing module, and we'll go over pretty much every screen here except for our marketing report screen at the bottom. That's more of a professional level session. So within the marketing campaign, this is our marketing campaign record, and in this case, we have essentially a lunch and learn that we're working on. Within the setup of this tab, I really wanted to show this first because this is where we get our ROI. So we have our campaign created to track this marketing effort, and then within our setup, we have these fields that show our budget and our actual. You'll notice that it's showing our revenue, our cost, our gross margin, and then our return on investment. Now, a couple of these fields we'll have to manually enter because, for example, if we're going to a trade show and we had to pay a certain amount to have a spot there or to have a booth, we had to buy a new tablecloth, all these different expenses that go into attending that trade show, that likely wouldn't be tracked within Manage. It's a separate purchase that happens outside of our Manage environment. We're not billing it to one of our customers. Well, we can take those invoices that happen outside, we can take that amount and we can place them into these estimate columns, into the actual cost column. When we place that into the actual cost column, it's going to calculate for us what our gross margin was, so how much we earned from this, how much it cost us, and then really how much we're benefiting from this effort. Now, what you might notice is that this budget field, we have a lot more options to enter in information than in our actual field. And that's because within the budget, we're saying what we expect, what we hope for. What do we think this is going to cost us, and how much revenue do we expect this effort to bring in? Our actual column, the revenue in that section is automatically populated from won opportunities. So we're not really relying on someone to give an estimate or maybe overjudge this, but we have it tied back to all of our opportunities, and when they're marked as won, it flows through into our actual revenue, and then we enter in the cost, what we actually spent outside of Manage, and that calculates our gross margin and our ROI. So we skipped over a lot of the basic fields in the campaign, but I did want to kind of scoot back and talk a little bit more about the campaign setup. So we already showed really the main benefit of having a campaign. It's linked to our opportunities associated with this effort. We can see our return on investment. There's a place to plug in what it cost us, so we can really look at this and see if it was a benefit to us, or maybe it cost a little too much money. We shouldn't do this in the future. Within the campaign settings, though, this is within our setup tables, and we can assign campaign types and subtypes to allow us to get a little bit more granular with both our reporting and really just assessing what marketing efforts bring in a good return. So we use this for not just reporting, but also categorizing. So as we're talking about a particular effort, it helps us split them up into separate campaigns so that we can then judge them for our reporting. I did want to show some examples here. One example that we have for a campaign type would be an email campaign. So email blast, this might be the most common. Some contacts that you've picked up, you want to send out some emails to them. A subtype for that could be your monthly newsletter. Another subtype could be a managed service offering that you've been emailing about consistently. We can create those two different campaigns. They're both email campaigns, but we can split them out even further into what type of email we're sending. And that way we can compare not only email campaigns against other types of campaigns like trade shows in the second example, but we can also get into our email campaigns and see what's most beneficial. Then our other example was trade shows. And I like this example because we're actually using markets as our subtypes. So we're attending a lot of trade shows possibly. Well, let's see which is most beneficial. If we go to accounting trade shows versus technology trade shows, which one are we getting the most leads on? Who needs our services? Now back into the campaign setup tab. Those types and subtypes are going to be associated on the main tab of this campaign, which we'll circle here, just marketing campaign screen. Within our setup is where we have all the information for our budgets and our actual costs and revenue. Like I mentioned before, what you budget for your revenue, what you estimate is going to come in from this, what you estimate you're going to spend, your cost, those are both manually entered. Now the actual cost is also manually entered because, like I mentioned, purchasing a booth at a trade show wouldn't necessarily be a transaction that would happen through Manage. So we take the cost to us, and we place that in the cost field so we can get an accurate return on investment. Now the item being automatically populated, as I mentioned, is that revenue. It's pulling from specifically won opportunities. So if we have active ongoing opportunities, it will not show up in this field. It's once they've been marked as won, that total revenue is going to flow through to this field. Also, gross profit and gross margin, that's going to calculate based on the cost and price entered, so we can't alter those fields either. Now, what's really nice about this is I'm showing a screenshot of our opportunity, because at this point you might be wondering, well, how does this campaign know from my list of hundreds of opportunities what's associated with this particular effort? Well, that's why we have this highlighted field here, our campaign dropdown on an opportunity. If you haven't noticed this field already, it's probably because you're not using campaigns, but it can be really, really helpful when you start to look at your reporting. In essence, every single opportunity that comes from this, let's say, trade show, we want that opportunity to have this campaign linked. And all we have to do is hit that dropdown, search for the appropriate campaign, and select it. Then the marketing campaign knows to reference this opportunity, to look for the won revenue, to look for activities going on with this particular opportunity. And this is exactly where it flows through. Now, we focused a lot on that setup tab where we looked at the actual, that option within actual revenue that shows all of our won opportunities. On the main tab, on the marketing campaign tab, we actually have more information. It's called an opportunity analysis pod. Now within this pod, it not only shows us the ones that are won, but it also shows us opportunities that are open. So money that's on the table, maybe we just need a little bit more effort there, and we can move these into that actual revenue field. We have another pop quiz here. So which fields must be manually entered into a marketing campaign? Okay, it looks like nearly everyone has answered. And so far, no one's wrong, but some of us are more correct. So I'll go over that. In this case, it's both A and B. Your actual cost and your estimated costs are both manually entered. Because like I mentioned, purchasing a booth at a trade show, not likely something that's going to flow through Manage. It could be done outside. It could be a separate payment. So we take all of that cost and we associate it here. Also buying materials for the trade show. If you wanted to have a plate of sandwiches at your booth, that would be another cost to you that influences your return on investment. We allow you to manually enter it just because we understand that some of those costs aren't tracked through Manage itself. So we give you a field to enter in everything that you've spent to make this marketing effort happen. And then when the revenue comes through, it'll calculate more accurately. And then actual revenue, I'm glad no one selected this. It has to come from a won opportunity. That's the only way you can populate the actual revenue field. Now, if this was the exam, what I would recommend is, because no one here was wrong, but you would have gotten the answer wrong if you had just picked one of the correct answers. In this case, if you're asked this sort of question, I would actually just open up a marketing campaign in this testing environment that you have with us, the Worth database, go to that particular screen and review. As you can see here, there's indications of which screens can be edited because they're underlined. So you could just come here and test, find out exactly which screens could be edited, and know that you're getting the right answer on that question. We want to take a little bit of time to talk about marketing analytics, and it would be difficult to do so without addressing some fields within our campaign that can be automatically populated either through the marketing APIs or through using ConnectWise Campaign. Now, ConnectWise Campaign, if you haven't played around with it, you can get a free trial by clicking the campaign screen within our marketing module. But really, it's marketing made a little bit simpler. You have the opportunity to see some more visual reporting for marketing. So if you want to see the sort of return that you're getting in terms of activity, are people clicking into your emails, are people submitting forms, and what to do with that information, you can do that all through Campaign. Now, when I say marketing analytics, I'm actually referring to this pod within our marketing campaign screen. You might have noticed that we have a couple fields that usually don't have any information. For example, links clicked, forms submitted, etc. Emails opened. Those particular fields have to be filled in through an integration. So either ConnectWise Campaign or any other marketing integration using the APIs. That will allow you to track this additional information within Manage. Also, kind of a fun fact, one of my favorite features of ConnectWise Campaign is that you can configure Campaign to react in certain ways to how your clients interact with your emails. One example would be if a client clicks into an email, maybe generate an activity, telling a sales member to call them and follow up. Additionally, you can say if someone submits a form, that's a certain amount of commitment. Let's go ahead and generate an opportunity record when they submit that form and fill in certain fields. So it can be pretty helpful to do a lot of that admin work in the background and initiate some sales for you in the background. Back to our marketing manager, Nancy. She's in the process of designing an email campaign. She wants to be able to do all of this through Manage and connect her effort to a marketing campaign. So what feature would we recommend that she use? The easiest way to do this is going to be through the ConnectWise Communications Manager. What we can do here, as we mentioned before, this is our email blast central. It's where we can reach out to all of our potential contacts, all of our prospects at this point, and kind of move them through the sales funnel, or start to move them through the sales funnel. Now, our communication manager is within our marketing module, And here we're actually going to populate a list. It's going to populate for you with every single contact in your system. What's nice about this is that we can go through and sort by all these different columns and fields and find exactly who we're looking for and then compose an email for them. Now up here at the top, I did want to show you just before we get into that other screen, you have the ability to select a group. Now this can be really handy because as you've noticed, we have a ton of contacts that are going to be returned. All of our company contacts are going to be available to email through our communications manager. So if we've set up groups, collections of contacts and companies that we want to reach out to, we can actually select that group and then send the email to all of those members a little bit easier than trying to filter through all these fields. And that brings us to another screen with the marketing module. So right now we're in Communications Manager. Just above it is our group screen. So our group screen is not really new anymore. We've had it for a couple versions, maybe a little over a year, but it's still pretty exciting to me because it gives you a lot more power to control who's in your groups, who's subscribed, and who's unsubscribed. Here we can create as many groups as we like. In this example, we have an employee referral group that we're going to reach out to people that our employees have mentioned could be great fits. As you'll notice below, we can describe this in any way that we like. I like to give it a really simple name. That way when we're in the Communications Manager, we don't have to go back into the group screen to see which group of contacts we're talking about. We don't want to have to go back and double check and make sure we're reaching out to the right people. Down below, we have the ability to look at everyone who is currently in this group if we need to. But what I like best are all of the mass actions that we have. So here we have the ability to remove contacts from the group en masse, subscribe contacts to the group en masse, and unsubscribe. So if someone calls in and says that they do not wish to be receiving your emails anymore, it's really easy to come in here and remove them from being subscribed to this group. That way they can stay in the group, but they won't receive these emails. You also have the ability to hit that new item icon, which, as you might have guessed, allows you to add contacts to this group. One of the nice things about this screen is that if you notice, we do have a mass select option. So we can use all of these different columns up here to find the contacts that we need to add and then add them to this group en masse, so making our lives a little bit easier. The group screen also has an audit trail tab. So this audit trail tab can be really helpful for us if we've ever run into a situation where we're saying who was added to this particular group, when were they removed, what happened here. Well, we have this tracked within our audit trail so you can see when the most recent changes were made and who made them. So kind of back to our business case. How is Nancy going to send out all of these emails and associate a marketing campaign that she created? Well, we're going to go back into our Communications Manager. We're going to say that our group has already been set up. We're going to come here and we can, at this point, we can either use our groups dropdown or any of these filters to find the contacts that we want. In this case, we are going to use a group. So we select our group, our client referral group, and once we select Compose Email, we would select all and then select Compose Email. And at this point, we're in our Compose Email screen where we can actually build out what we want to send to the customer. So a couple things that I wanted to mention. As you can see here from my note, this is where you assign the campaign. So we have this nice campaign dropdown right at the top. This dropdown, similar to the campaign dropdown on an opportunity, is what's going to associate this effort with the marketing campaign that we created. So we would select the dropdown, search for the marketing campaign that we built out, and then it would be associated with every single email. That's going to track our emails sent through this campaign. We can also add on a survey if we wanted to, but we'll go through and add all of these details like our summary and our text. Now, one thing I did want to mention, since we are talking about marketing, is if this is not the type of email that you would want to be sending to a prospect, no worries. We actually have the ability up here in the top to apply HTML templates. So this would allow you to search for and select an HTML template that you've built out and send a more formal email, more marketing type email out to all of your contacts. It wouldn't have to just be plain text. Once we finish composing our email, adding in our HTML, ensuring our campaign is selected, we would hit the next button, and that would give us the option to create a historical activity. Now, historical activities are one of our best practices because what they do is they indicate who was emailed and when, by creating an activity in a closed status that lists on that contact screen. So for example, if someone were to call in to my dispatcher and say, hey, I received this email, I don't know why I'm on this list, I would like to be removed from it. If my dispatcher is trying to figure out exactly how they should speak to this client, how they can resolve their issue, the best thing to do would be to say, what's your name? Go to their contact record, and then in the activities tab, if they looked, they could see a closed activity from earlier today saying that my specific member, saying that Renee sent out an email and it was called this. They see that email. If they need to, they can ask me, but likely they can tell right from there why they were emailed and kind of address it a little bit better. And especially if this is not just an existing company, but if this is a prospect and they're interested, but they're not necessarily following our directions, for example, responding back to a sales ad address, they just call in to ask more questions. Well, now our dispatcher can be more of a friend to our sales team and really speak to them and speak to the offering so they can have an intelligent, informed communication with this prospect and help to further the sale. Now, once you select next on this, you're going to have the ability to create a follow-up activity, which for our marketing process, this could be really helpful. If we're kind of towards the end of our marketing looking into getting into sales, this might be where we'd want to generate a follow-up activity to call everyone that we emailed if these are pretty hot leads. Now, once we hit next on that follow-up activity, we're then brought to our process records screen, which this is nice, process requests. This is nice because we can review exactly how many people are being emailed. It's a great place to figure out whether or not you might have selected too many or too little. Just check the number, make sure it looks about accurate, and then we can hit process. Now, something that I'm actually going to back up and say, because I use the communications manager a decent bit to send out internal notifications about our release webinars. And my favorite feature that I didn't think to mention was the fact that at the top here, you can send a test. I like to do this every time I use the marketing manager because as you saw, the communications manager, because as you saw, we're emailing this out to tons of records and they're prospects. So what I always do is once I'm done with my email, I hit send test. And then I receive in my inbox a copy of the email that the client would receive. I can review it, make sure that all the links work, make sure that it looks the way that I would expect, especially since I typically use an HTML file. And then once I'm happy with it, after I hit send test and I review, that's when I would hit next and then create my activities and then process. So now we're going to move into our first activity. In this case, we're going to get into our marketing module and select that communications manager. We're going to find a couple of contacts and then we're going to generate an email for them. Now at this point, we're going to actually go through and build out that entire email, create the historical activity, we're going to skip a follow-up activity, and then we're going to process to send all of these different requests. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 to 10 minutes to go through and complete these steps, and then we'll come right back for our next session. So we didn't see any questions on the activity. I hope everyone was able to complete it. Once again, if you're having any issues with your logging into that training environment, definitely let us know as soon as possible because it's a huge benefit for you, not only as we're going through these different activities, but also just as a point of reference after we break today and then for your exam later on. Another pop quiz, what are marketing groups used for? Creating service teams, assigning members to a project, organizing companies and contacts, or dispatching tickets. So not everyone has responded yet, but so far all of us are correct. So awesome job. We primarily use marketing groups to organize our companies and contacts. Now, when we mean organize our companies and contacts, as we're working with them through a marketing process or through the sales process, we're learning about them, their interests, the products that they use. We can create groups to make it really easy to target our marketing and send out those email blasts to a very specific subset of clients. As a pro tip, speaking of email targeting, the communications manager can be accessed from a bunch of different list views, which makes it even easier for us to build these groups and send these mass emails. So for example, in the contact search, I can look for contacts that are all listed as decision makers for their companies. I can select them all and then send to the communications manager directly from that list view. This means that I can send out a quick blast to all my primary contacts, all my decision makers, or I can use that to create a group to email them later on called primary contact companies for companies. Now, if you think about this, you'll notice we have agreement and configuration. Those are probably my two other favorite examples because with configurations, this can show our workstations and servers. If we have clients that are all using a particular type of configuration, a particular type of server, that's maybe it's going to be end of life in the next year, we can go to our configuration search. Instead of trying to figure out through records of sales and talking to technicians who all has this server, just go to the configuration search, find that server configuration record that's still active, select all, send to communications manager, and you're already on your way to having that email out. And also with agreements. If we have a particular type of agreement and we really want to start, since this is a marketing session, maybe we want to start upselling them, getting more interest into other items, or trying to press referrals so we can get other leads in the door. We can find those users who are on our managed service platinum who really enjoy using it and get them to present referrals, kind of incentivize them to help us find new leads. With that agreement search example, we're going to go into our agreement search screen and look for an agreement type called equipment rental. In this case, this action button, this is what I'm referring to when I say that we can open the communications manager from other screens. It means take everyone selected and push them into the communications manager so that we can send an email. Now we're in the communications manager. We have all of our contacts for those agreements that are listed as equipment rental. And now we have the ability to add contacts to a group. So we're going to use the actions option here, add contacts to a group. At this point, we just select new, create a brand new group, and we have that record saved for future emails. We can actually back out of the communications manager now. We don't have to send an email. We can use that other action. We can use any of these other actions as needed, or we could go ahead and send this email. Now, this is something that I would like to just take a moment to highlight, is that using the communications manager, we talk about it as a place for sending out email blasts, but really it can be a really nice area to create new groups, to create new activities for your prospects, and also to manage your groups as well. So we have all of these options and attaching tracks. So we have all these options within the communications manager screen, not just composing emails. We actually have another activity for you. So we have one more activity, one more pop quiz, and then we're going to be moving on to our last session. But in this case, we want to associate a campaign to an email. So I called this out earlier, but we really want to make sure that we understand the full flow. So in this case, we're going to create a marketing campaign. So we're going to go into the marketing module, marketing campaign screen, hit the new item icon, start building out a new campaign, give it a unique name so that it's easier for you to find later. If you need to include your first or last name in this, you can do so. Just keep in mind that everyone's logging into this database, so we want to make sure that we don't include any too personal information, but also that we can distinguish it from our friends who are also going through these steps. Then, within the marketing module, I say right-click, just so that we can review both these screens at the same time. Right-click and open the communications manager in a new tab. We're going to find all of our primary contacts using that primary column drop-down. If you don't see the primary column, it might be hidden, so just scroll to the far right and see if it's listed there for you. Once we have all those members selected, we're just going to compose this email and then be sure that the key point here is to go into the campaign dropdown and find the campaign you just created with the unique naming. Then you can associate it, and then once you send out this email, you can go back into that campaign and see all the information that's been tracked. So I'll give you guys a little bit longer to complete this one. Once again, still 5 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to meet back up in just a few moments. Looks like we didn't have any other questions about associating campaign to an email, so I hope you all had time to go through these steps. We have another pop quiz, and then we're basically done for the day, or for the first part of the day. After sending emails via the communications manager, it is best practice to create which of the following: historical activity, track, activity, or group. Okay, excellent. Looks like nearly everyone is correct here. Historical activity. Now, the only reason why I call it historical activity is because we want this created in a closed status to represent that we sent this in the past, that this has happened, and log it essentially just as an audit trail on that contact record. Now, if an activity, we'd typically be speaking of a follow-up activity. So, for example, to give a call, to maybe check in, do a little bit of research, create an opportunity. Those can all be examples of activity records. It wouldn't necessarily be best practice. It would just depend on your goals for sending that email. What needs to happen next? Is there any further action needed? Historical activity, we think almost regardless of the situation, it's pretty helpful to have. Even if it's just sending out a newsletter, likely no follow-ups needed. You're going to send out another one next month, but it's nice to have a record that it was sent to on this date if any questions come up. Speaking of questions, do we have any related to the marketing module at this time? Now, as I mentioned, this first hour, we are speaking specifically about the marketing module. We're going to go on a 10-minute break just after questions here, and then Mitch is going to come back and talk more about sales. So we'll get into opportunity records, activities, etc. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions come through. If you come up with any during the break, please feel free to post them in the Q&A pod, and we can address them as soon as we get back. Now we're going to go on a 10-minute break, so let's meet back at 9:35.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back from our quick break. And as you can now see on your screen, we are going to be diving into the sales process within Manage. So what does that mean that we will be talking about? Well, we're going to be focused today on opportunities, what they are, and how we get the most out of them so we can really use them to their fullest. Not just so we're tracking sales using opportunities, but how we can then see the benefit of doing so and really getting the most out of our system, seeing this whole sales process end to end, and then really start taking advantage of the information we've been putting in ConnectWise Manage so we can close more deals more often. So when we're talking about opportunities, the three main things we're going to be talking about is classifying them using types, statuses, and stages. Once we are doing that, the other side of opportunities is going to be keeping them compliant, and that's kind of a vague term, but don't worry, we'll dive into exactly what compliant opportunities are and how you keep them that way coming up later on. And then lastly, we're going to be touching on opportunity conversions. And this is really where the big value of tracking your sales as opportunities comes from. And I'll dive into that in a lot of detail once we get to that stage. So, as always, I'm sure you're prepared. I have a quick exam review question for you based on the content that Renee covered earlier before we got started. So the first question is, what must be true for the actual revenue to populate on a marketing campaign? I know Renee covered this earlier, and she asked about a couple of the other fields on the campaign during her exercises, but for this one, is that actual revenue going to be coming from A, the campaign must be linked to won opportunities, B, the campaign must be linked to opportunities that have been converted and then invoiced, is going to be C, the field is manually entered, or D, the campaign just has to be linked to any opportunity at all. Let me see what you guys think in that Q&A pod. So far, it looks like we've split the room, but not everyone has answered. Let's see if the last two can tip it one way or the other. And it looks like that's just about everyone. There we go, that's everyone now. And we were mostly correct. It is going to be the campaign must be linked to won opportunities. And the fact that they've been won is key here. Yes, you want to make sure that every opportunity is being linked back to a campaign, and having any open opportunity linked to your campaigns is good, but for that revenue to show up as actual revenue, the opportunity has to have been marked as won. Marking an opportunity as won is going to actually close out that opportunity for you, which is important, but also indicate that it is something that the customer has signed off and approved and you have sold. So making sure that it is won is key, because if we haven't won it, it's not revenue that we've earned yet. We haven't done anything for it, and it's not going to be reporting back as actual revenue. However, we can see that as potential revenue on the actual campaign, just not actually won yet. All right, our second question. What should be used to segment your customers for organizational and marketing purposes? Is it going to be A, ticket templates, B, departments, which, as you guys probably know, they're also known as business units, C, groups, or D, the company status? As before, let's see what you think in the answer pod. All right, I see a lot more consistency with our answers so far. More consistency, but less answers than the last one. So I'm gonna give you guys a couple more seconds if you are thinking it over. All right, I think that is everyone. And most of us got it correct. It is going to be C, groups. Those groups are how we actually classify who our customers are and then group them together so we can market out to them. Now I saw some people did select company status, and while that can be used to indicate who your customers are and what they mean to you, you can only really set one company status to a customer at a time, and that's going to be set to the business unit as a whole. If you need to mark it out to different groups of people, maybe you're focused on decision makers, or maybe people in a specific role at that company, or maybe someone actually falls into different marketing groups. Maybe you need to mark it out to people who are decision makers one day, but then the next day you're marking it out based on region. You can't really classify all those different types of information with just that one company status, and this is where groups come into play, because you can use whatever criteria you want when you're searching for those contacts before you add them into that group, and then use that group going forward for all your marketing purposes based on whatever that set of criteria was in the first place. The groups are just a lot more flexible, and they can kind of be used any way you want to group those contacts together, and there's no limit to the number of groups a contact can be added into. So like before, we want to work through this ConnectWise life cycle so we can actually see where we are throughout the process. We started with marketing today, and we're bringing in those new leads, not just bringing them, but tracking where they're coming from and the revenues and costs associated with them. And now that we have those leads in, well, we now need to start working through that sales process. This is going to be involving building out an opportunity and a quote. And I don't have it on here, but we're also going to be using activities as part of this. Activities are key to track what steps actually need to be taken as part of that sales process, and they're linked hand in hand with the actual opportunities themselves. So for this, we're going to step into the shoes of John, who is our sales manager. He's currently struggling to keep track of what's in his sales pipeline. He's sending a ton of emails to sales reps, and he needs a way to track all potential sales and easily access this in his source of truth, Manage. I'm sure you guys have heard us talk about Manage as our source of truth before, because it doesn't matter who in your company has a question, the answer should be within Manage, so everyone is looking in that same spot. So everything's found in one simple location. You don't have to go hunt it down. Oh, hey, do you remember who that customer was that we had a deal for the other day? Or what's the next steps on the potential sale you're working on, that large project? All of these answers are in Manage, and we track them using some of the sales features. What are those sales features? You guys probably already know. It is going to be opportunities. Opportunities are how we track what we're selling, who we're selling it to, and where in our pipeline that particular deal is. Is this a brand new lead that we're just engaging with right now? Have we been in talks with them for a while and just negotiating the final terms? Have they actually approved the sale? Or is this a deal that we've already closed and went out and we're moving on to the next step? All of this needs to be tracked as an opportunity. Even the deals we eventually lose, that's useful information to have going forward if we ever need to remarket out to those customers or see how we engaged with them in the past. If we're not recording this in Manage, this is information we're losing and missing out on, and then we're not able to really act on that and leverage it and take advantage of it next time we're dealing with the customer, which really puts us in a disadvantage. So, every sale is going to start as an opportunity. Doesn't matter what we're selling, who we're selling it to. An opportunity is going to be one of those first steps we need to do to make sure that we can track the entire life cycle of that sale tied back to that single one point. So what is an opportunity? It's going to be how all our potential sales are tracked throughout the application. It tracks not only what we're selling using the actual products in our system or estimates if we're not quite sure what we're selling yet, but we know how much we're hoping to make. It's also going to track the actual type of sale. Maybe it's one of our managed services we're selling, or maybe it's a large professional services contract, or maybe we're doing some installation work. We can go ahead and classify out these different opportunities, which really helps us on the reporting side of things so we can actually see what we're selling the most of and what we're the most successful at selling. We're also going to be tracking where it is in that life cycle and whether it's been won, lost, open, or anything in between. So, before we can actually use opportunities, they do need to be created, and just like anything in Manage, there's a couple different ways to do that depending on why you're creating that opportunity. It can be done manually, either using that new record dropdown up in the top left of Manage right there. You can also do it from the My Opportunities screen and create a brand new opportunity from there. But what I prefer, and what you're probably going to be doing most often, is creating these opportunities from activities. Activities are going to represent all of your brand new leads. These are going to be potential sales that you haven't actually engaged with yet. You don't know if they're interested, let alone maybe if it's even a good lead or a good fit for you. So using these activities are how we're going to track who our new leads are and what those next steps need to be as that actual activity itself. This could be maybe a list of potential leads that you got from a trade show, or people who've actually accessed your website and shown some interest, downloaded an ebook on the services you provide. This could also be some dynamic searches coming in online that you've been tracking, or a walk-in customer, or a referral. All of these first steps, these first touches are going to start as an activity, tracking what needs to be done and who needs to be contacted. And then from there, after you've contacted them, if they do show interest and you can see this lead growing somewhere, that's when we're going to go ahead and create an opportunity from the actual activity itself. And we'll want to do this from this very initial activity, because then we'll go ahead and see all of our future activities also tied back to this same opportunity, so we can see the whole sales picture together. We can see every step that was taken as individual activities, and the opportunity itself will be that single record that ties that deal together that we can use as a reference later on. But these can also be created from a quoting integration, such as ConnectWise Sell. If you are creating quotes through Sell or another tool, we can actually have opportunities created automatically, and those opportunities will link back to that quote going forward. And you can very easily hop between them, which I'll show you guys an example of a little later on. But however you are getting those quotes out there, you are going to need an opportunity in Sell, even if you are creating that quote elsewhere, use that opportunity in Manage, even if you have that quote elsewhere, because Manage is going to be your source of truth for what your sales cycle looks like and your potential revenue and all that reporting. That's going to be pulling from Manage. So let's take a look at how we actually build our opportunity now. Two very basic things you want to set up is make sure you do have the correct customer selected and the company itself, and you'll want to go ahead and update that summary line. I mentioned earlier that most of the time you're creating opportunities, they are going to be created from activities in your system, and one of the reasons for that is it's actually going to save you a lot of time right here. On the actual activity, you already have a summary of what's being done, and you already know who that company and contact is. By creating the opportunity from there, we'll pull those over and create a link and pre-populate that information for you, save you just a little bit of extra time. Now, the real meat of the actual opportunity, where we start tracking all that useful information, is going to be this opportunity pod. And there's a lot on here, but there's a couple fields I wanted to call out. First is going to be this type field. This is where we start classifying and breaking down and segmenting out the different types of services that I am selling. So maybe I'm focused on kind of breaking out. I need to see what I'm selling as hardware, what I'm doing as consulting, what I'm doing as application development. Maybe further down that list I have my managed services or managed security. Whatever the different services I offer, I want to break those out as different types. So from a reporting perspective, I can very easily see which opportunities are being won, which ones I'm winning most often, and just what I'm selling the most of overall. Even more important than that is going to be the stage. Now, the stage is going to represent your sales cycle. This list can and should be customized to match what your cycle looks like. I have a relatively simple one here where I start off tracking a new lead. This is what's going to happen for every brand new opportunity I create after that first contact with that customer, before I'm too sure on whether or not they are or are not interested in my services. Everyone starts off as a lead. Then, after the first couple conversations, if I've gone ahead and I've determined, guess what? They're a great fit for my services, and I'm a great fit for what they need. At that point, they've been qualified, and I know this is a potential sale that's worth pursuing. And not every lead is going to be that way. Some of them I'm going to realize very quickly off the bat, you know what, I never should have bothered pursuing this in the first place, and we're never going to get past that lead stage, and that's fine. That's what this cycle is for, so we can track who makes it through how far, and kind of see how close we are getting to that finish line. And then for me, after I've qualified them, well, next thing I need to do is build out and deliver a quote to them. And again, it doesn't matter whether I'm doing this in another tool or in Manage itself, we're going to be tracking the progress through my opportunity and moving on to that next stage of quoted. Then after they've gone ahead and committed to buying, this could be after they've actually approved the quote, maybe verbally or in an email, I'll go ahead and move it on to that number 4 committed stage. And then finally is when it is won. Now this is after they've approved it, but also after I've converted it over to that next step. I need to make sure that all of my opportunities, when they're won, they do also get fully converted. So 1 is going to represent I'm completely finished with this opportunity. There's no action items left on there. And that conversion, what that entails, I'll cover that up a little bit more later on. Now I'd say that the 5 steps I have here are pretty basic, and you may see, well, you know what, I don't really have a quoted stage. Once they've qualified, actually do the quote right then and there. Change this list to match what your process is. Because if you have extra steps in here that don't pertain to your team, it's going to make them less likely to enter this information in, and then you're going to have less useful data, and it's really going to hurt you on the reporting side of things. And we'll talk about a little more how these stages come up when we get to our sales funnel later on, but these are key for tracking how likely you are to win a deal and the potential revenue your company stands to bring in. You can also add new stages. So if you have a review process in here somewhere where your opportunities and quotes need to be reviewed before they get sent out, you may add a couple stages in here indicating that it needs review and it has been reviewed, so you can see the full cycle that matches what your sales process may look like. And the last list I wanted to point out on here is going to be the status dropdown, and this is where you really track what the next step on this opportunity is. Now, I just have mine in basic right now, listing that it is open, and that's because I'm currently going to be working through my activities, which I can point out. I got a little red flag here. I don't have any activities attached. We'll talk about that more coming up and why that's a problem. But this is also going to track, has it been won? Has it been approved? Has it been lost yet? So this really tracks what's going on with the opportunity right now, and it's going to be used together with the stage. And one of the great reasons for that is, as you work through this sales lifecycle, if unfortunately you end up losing an opportunity, it's very useful information to know, not just that you lost the opportunity, but what stage you made it to before you lost that. In the example I talked about earlier, we had that brand new lead, and I realized very quickly that this was not a good fit. Well, an opportunity that never made it past the lead stage, I know that doesn't have a lot of useful information. I'm probably not going to come back to there. But if they made it all the way to the quoted stage before they, for whatever reason, decided that they weren't a good fit, well, that is very interesting to me. That is an opportunity I might want to revisit later on in the future. So by using the stage and the status together, we can track how far they made it through the sales cycle and what's going on with that opportunity, such as has it been won or lost. You'll also notice on here, I do have multiple lost statuses. Rather than just using a single lost status, I've built out multiple of them, and this allows me to classify not just that I did lose the opportunity, which unfortunate, but now I can also track why I lost that opportunity. This again enables me and my sales team to come back, review this opportunity and see, well, maybe there's a reason I can come back to this later on, such as, well, the solution I was offering, they loved what they were hearing, it just didn't fit their price range. Well, I know they get a new budget at the start of the next year, so maybe next year I'll want to come back and reach out to them again and say, hey, I know you liked what you saw last time, but our prices didn't fit what you were looking for. Great news, we have a new sale, and I figured you'd have a new budget this time of year, so let's go ahead and start negotiations again and see if there's something we can do to make this deal work so we can both benefit from that. So by properly classifying your opportunities, using all this information, it's extremely useful for after the fact. Just because an opportunity has been lost doesn't mean it stops being useful to you and your team. You spent time building out this opportunity, gathering information from that customer. If you're not taking the time to log that and track that and manage, you're really setting yourself back from moving forward and making new potential sales later on. Before I move on, a couple other things I wanted to call out on here. With the sales reps and sales engineer, you can track who the primary and secondary reps are working through each deal. Probability up here indicates your likelihood of winning the sale, and that's going to be tied to the stage, and I'll show you more of how that's used later on. And another big field, and another red flag for me, is this campaign field. Renee talked about earlier how we use our marketing campaigns to track where our new sales come from, and every opportunity came from somewhere. There's a reason we're pursuing that opportunity, and that reason is that marketing campaign. Maybe it's a referral that came in. Maybe it was a series of ads I ran on a search engine, such as Google. Maybe they came dynamically through our website. However that lead came in, that needs to be tracked as a campaign so we can report that revenue back and see where most of our revenue does initially come from. So if I can see, oh, most of my revenue is coming from people searching for me. Well, once I know that, then that's an indication that I need to put more effort there in the first place. And if we're not filling in this campaign every single time on every opportunity, we're missing out on critical data of where our revenue originates from in the first place. Another thing we can do to help make this possible is take advantage of custom fields. I believe Renee was talking about that a little earlier. And not only do custom fields allow us to add new fields to our screens. Added a new one down here to indicate whether or not a customer was brand new to my service or whether they were a repeat customer. But we can also mark fields as required. There are some hard-coded required fields, such as stage and status, but any of these fields that are not required, I can actually make required in that custom field setup table, such as campaign, to make sure that my campaign does get entered on every opportunity every time, which helps you give better data so you can make more informed decisions on where to spend your time marketing your services. All right. So now that we've classified our opportunity, we actually now need to start listing out and building what it is that we are selling. We're going to use two different tools for this, both in the forecast pod on the opportunity. The first, which I have listed up at the top, is going to be our products. These are things that I know what they are. I know that the customer is interested. I know exactly what they want. I can go ahead and add those products and services. Even if it is just labor that I'm selling, I'm going to add that as a product on my opportunity to represent the labor or a recurring service. All those get added as products, and they're going to be built out in the procurement product catalog. These are going to be used during the actual conversion process. This allows us to convert them into a billable record, so they can be converted over to a sales order or a service ticket or an agreement. We can also add estimates. These are going to be placeholders. I may not know exactly what they want yet, so I don't want to spend the time searching for or creating dummy products that are just going to be deleted later on. However, it is still useful to track how much potential revenue an opportunity can bring in. This is key for any kind of accurate sales forecasting. If I'm not tracking how much I can make from a deal, well then I don't really know how much time I should be spending following it up. So if I can see, you know what, I don't know what they want yet, but I know they're probably going to be interested in around, I don't know, say $5,000 worth of services, that may be more worth my time than if they just want to buy a single piece of hardware from me. Well, I can go ahead and list out, using these estimates, what the estimate represents, whether it's a physical product, maybe it's labor, maybe it's a recurring service, which I'm particularly interested in, and I can see the total revenue and cost that I'm expecting to get from there. This is going to be key for my reporting on my forecasting, so I can see which opportunities are going to be worth the most of my time later on, because I may have more opportunities in front of me that I can spend time on, and I want to make sure that I'm spending my time wisely pursuing the leads that are A, most likely to close, and B, the most profitable if they do close. So using these estimates and products together, we can very easily and effectively track how much we stand to gain from the opportunity itself with the estimates, and then later on, listing exactly what's being sold when we build out our actual quote itself, so we can actually use that same information when it comes time to convert later, which I'll go into a little more later on. All right, so now I want to take a look at a couple of the different reporting options to take advantage of some of the information we've been tracking so far. And one of the biggest ones, and most useful in my opinion, is going to be the sales funnel. This is going to help you make informed decisions about how healthy your sales pipeline looks and whether there's any potential problems coming up that you might be able to prevent a little earlier. You should recognize this list right here. It's those same list of stages I used earlier, and this list of stages is going to match whatever you make your list look like. If you add more stages in here, you'll see them reflected on the funnel. If you take some stages away, you'll see less. So this is going to match that same list we saw on the actual opportunity screen. And it's going to be displaying how much revenue I stand to gain. You'll see two different columns here showing different information. The first, revenue in thousands, I like to call the optimistic number. This is the total revenue of every opportunity in that stage. So of the 45 opportunities I have as leads, we have 216,000 worth of revenue. Now I call it the optimistic number because I'm not going to win all those deals. I don't care how great my sales team is. There's no way they're going to close every deal that comes their way. This is where the expected number comes, the more realistic number. This is going to be calculated using the probability listed on my opportunities themselves. Now, that probability, as I mentioned earlier, is tied to the actual stages of my opportunity. So when they're in a lead, there's probably going to be a lower probability of me winning that deal than if they make it all the way to the committed stage where they've actually approved the opportunity. So by setting up different probabilities for those different stages, I can get an accurate representation of how much revenue I can bring in based on the total amount of deals that I have open and ongoing at that time. This is extremely useful for me, so I can actually see how much revenue I should be getting, and I should be seeing a similar number all along this expected side. Because while I may have, and probably do have, more leads than I do have quoted opportunities, the higher probability of those quoted opportunities should give me a similar number all along that right-hand side. If I see any drastic dips, such as this qualified stage right here, that's a big red flag for me. That's a problem and tells me I'm going to be hitting a dry spell coming up later on in the year when all these opportunities, I say all two of my opportunities in my qualified stage end up making it down to the committed stage, which honestly may end up being none of them since I do only have 2 right now. Looking at this at a glance, this tells me I need to be focusing on those leads and getting more of those processed into that qualified stage as soon as possible so I don't hit a dry spell later on, because that could really throw off the new revenue I'm bringing in. And that's a problem that, since I've identified it earlier, I do still have time to correct. And that's something we definitely want to take a look at and want to take advantage of. And this is really where a lot of the value from building out and customizing those opportunities comes in. This is an example of how we can actually use that information to make informed decisions. Now, I talked earlier about how the probability is tied to that sales stage. This can also be entered manually by your team, but if you prefer to keep it hard locked onto those set sales stages, which I honestly prefer because salespeople tend to be more optimistic. They like to think they can close every deal, whereas the probabilities you set for each stage, you've probably figured out based on the averages, you know that only 10% of your leads actually make it through to 1 opportunities. If we go ahead and use that 10 every time, it's going to give us a better, bigger picture of how all of our leads are going to come through all together. So if you lock it down, which is going to be done in the My Company screen, you can make sure that we're going to be using those hard-coded probabilities that you've set up for your team to use. And these probabilities are going to be set up in the sales probability setup table right here. This is where we can actually build out what those different stages are and the probabilities associated with them. We can also set up a funnel color, so you can go ahead and arrange your funnel in a color scheme that makes sense to you. If you don't like my haphazard choice of colors I've chosen right here, maybe you can go with the old Roy G. Biv look if that's more your speed. All right, pop quiz for you guys. I gave the answer to this at least 6 times, I think, so I'm going to be slightly disappointed if you get it wrong. Which opportunity field controls where it displays in the sales funnel? Is it the close date, the status, the type, or the stage? Let me see what you guys think in that answer pod. All right, I'm happy to report that you guys answered very quickly and correctly. The answer is going to be D, that sales stage. So as you set up those stages on your opportunities, you'll see that reflected here on the sales funnel. All right, let's check in with John, our sales manager, and his team members are always working on multiple sales at a time. Unfortunately, this causes some of them to be forgotten about. If sales are not promptly followed up on, deals are lost, and I don't need to tell you that that is a problem. If I'm ignoring potential sales, the customer's probably shopping around elsewhere. So we need to stay engaged with our customers and make sure that we're following up with them on a consistent basis and always moving the ball forward so we can make it through those series of sales stages. How can John help his team to remember what needs to be done next? This is something I mentioned earlier on as well. We're going to use those activities in conjunction with our opportunities. When we were looking at our opportunity earlier, and I said there was a red flag on there, the first one I mentioned was that our opportunity did not have an activity associated with it. And if you remember that screenshot from earlier, it was a literal red flag. The next step icon wasn't nice and blue like it is right now. It was highlighted in red, letting me know that there was a problem. Opportunities can and should always have an activity tied to them that's open and scheduled in the future. If there's not an activity scheduled in the future, there's no next step that needs to be taken, and those are the opportunities that get lost and forgotten about, and those are the customers that end up going with a competitor because they feel they're neglected, they're not getting any attention, they're going to go engage with someone who actually is trying to win their business. So let's take a look at the actual activity itself. A lot of the same information up at the top here, classifying who we're actually working with and what the actual opportunity is. We use the activity type field to classify what type of activity is being taken. Are we calling them up? Are we creating a quote for them? Are we scheduling an in-person meeting? Are we doing a remote meeting? Am I just sending them a follow-up email at a later date? Whatever that next step is, we use that type field to classify what action needs to be taken. We can go ahead and schedule what needs to be done and when. And then down below, we can add any notes and resources that are involved in the activity itself. Now, since I mentioned you need an activity always scheduled in the future, one question I get asked is, do I just reschedule the same activity for next time? And the answer to that is no. Each activity represents one action that needs to be taken. If there's something that needs to be done today and something that needs to be done tomorrow, those are going to be separate activities. And you'll typically only want one activity at a time for that. So I'll call them today, we'll have a discussion and say, yeah, I need to think about it, call me back tomorrow and we'll see what our next steps are. In that case, what I'll want to do is close out my activity and create a brand new one. But rather than do that in 2 steps, we can actually do that in 1 by setting up with a status for our activities called closed and new follow-up, and check this box over right here. This allows me to close out an activity and create an identical copy of it at the exact same time. That new copy carries over any notes that I have been keeping, but now we have a new activity to represent what happens next. And the reason we want to use multiple activities for this is so we can track all the different steps that your sales reps take, so you can actually see the effort that they're putting in. If you're tracking your reps by the number of calls they make, each of those calls they make is represented in Manage, our source of truth, as an activity. So you can very quickly and easily report on who's doing the most effort, who's putting in the most time to make sure that these sales are being acted on. Next thing I wanted to talk about in some detail is keeping our opportunities compliant. Here I'm looking at the My Sales Overview screen where your sales reps can see all the opportunities that they're working on for the quarter, and more importantly, which ones are bad, which ones are not compliant, which ones need to have something corrected. So zooming up right here and hovering over one, I can see this opportunity is highlighted in red, which is bad. We want to keep the red out. And that's for 2 reasons. 1, the close date is past due. Currently, the close date is set to a date in the past, which means I'm expecting to close this maybe a week ago, but the opportunity is still open. That doesn't make sense. I can't be expecting to close it in the past and it still be open. If it's in the past, it should already be won, or that close date needs to be updated to reflect when I'm actually expecting to close it. And also, there are no open activities. This is an opportunity that either has been or is going to be forgotten about in the near future, and that's something I need to correct by scheduling something to go ahead and happen next. There's really only a couple of reasons why opportunities are going to be highlighted red like this and be non-compliant, and they're all pretty straightforward. A couple of them I mentioned. That close date does need to be scheduled in the future, and if it's not, that's a problem. You do need an open activity in the future. If it's not, that's a problem as well. If there's no activities at all, that's also a problem. And the opportunity has to have some revenue associated with it. If I don't stand to bring in any revenue on this opportunity, then it's not worth my time. How do I represent the revenue that's going to be brought in? I mentioned it earlier. It's going to be those products and estimates on the forecast. That's how we represent the potential revenue. And if we don't have anything listed there, then it's not worth my time. Or I'm just not tracking it properly. Either way, that's a problem and needs to be fixed. We can also use a quoting tool like I talked about earlier, such as ConnectWise Sell, and you can access that from your opportunity directly. So if I've built out a quote in Sell and I'm looking at my opportunity and need to reference that quote, I can use this quote button on the actual opportunity itself, and that will actually open up the corresponding quote in Sell for this specific opportunity. If no quote exists yet, this will start the process to create a brand new one. So it keeps everything linked together very smoothly. I don't need to go hunting around. I'm only 1 click away from where I need to be. If you guys want more information on Sell, here's a quick introduction right here. It's a quote and proposal tool. Also allows you to do some very detailed product sourcing to pull in images, descriptions, and prices, as well as some reporting on what's been sold and some nice little automation pieces to help you move things through the sales process using the order porter page. And you can find more information about that on our university. We have tons of Sell content out there. All right, another pop quiz for you guys on manage. All the following reasons will cause an opportunity to show as out of compliance, except for one. Is that going to be A, the close date is past due, B, there's no open activities, C, the revenue is a $0 amount, or D, the opportunity is in a new status for more than 30 days? Let me see what you guys think in that Q&A pod. All right, looks about that was everyone. And the answer is going to be D, it's in a new status for more than 30 days. While I'd say that's a problem, that's not going to flag something as out of compliance. So those three top ones: needs an activity scheduled in the future, needs to have a close date in the future if it's still open, and it needs to be worth at least $1. All right. Those animated in exactly as I wanted. With John, our sales manager, closing deals feels great, but until the services that his team sells are delivered and invoiced, they don't make any money. Confusion around what was sold causes delays and can actually jeopardize the deal itself. If the customer's approved a quote, but I'm fumbling the ball when it comes to actually delivering on that service, that's going to cause a ton of problems. So one thing we can do to streamline this whole process is take advantage of our opportunity conversions. Opportunity conversions allow us to take all the information we've been building into that opportunity, who we're selling it to, who the actual contacts are, what's being sold, all those products and services, and take that and create a brand new record using the information without having to rely on anyone to do any manual double entry. If we're not converting, your team is doing double entry whether you realize it or not. All the information they're adding to the quote, that's information that you need to have on whatever comes next. And if you're not converting, someone has to go manually enter that now. And that's where the double entry comes in. Enter it on the quote, enter it on the record that we're going to bill for. The conversion cuts that in half. We use everything that we quote for and carry that over, which answers a lot of questions and prevents a lot of the confusion that I see happen all the time. So to actually go ahead and convert over, this is going to be done from the opportunity itself. There's a convert button right there at the top. You can also use this win button if the opportunity is still open, and that allows you to both mark it as one and convert it all in one smooth process. When you are converting or winning, you'll first need to mark everything as one. You'll hit next right here. You then get a summary of what's going on. In this case, we're winning the records, and then you can win and convert. This allows you to go ahead and create whatever that next step is, which can be a sales order, which is typically used if there's just physical product that needs to be sold, or it can also be used as a handoff point where product can be ordered before a service ticket or project is created. You can also create the service ticket or project directly from the opportunity, and we'll carry over the products. Any labor that's been sold will be used to define how we want to bill that service ticket or product, and any physical products will be listed right alongside there so they can be ordered and delivered. Or we can convert directly to an agreement, which is going to save a ton of time when it comes to creating your actual recurring contracts. And products are going to drive how this conversion happens. We're going to go into this a lot more detail next week, and we're short on time now, so I don't want to use up too much more going over this, but it's the product class that determines how these records get created. If we're using service class products, those define the billing methods for our service tickets and projects. Agreement class is used for those recurring products to add additions to my agreement, and the inventory and non-inventory are going to be used for ordering and just invoicing the actual products and line items themselves. All right, let's check in with John again. He likes that win and convert feature. However, in his organization, the same person isn't selling and converting. The sales rep wins the opportunity, and then the sales operations team completes the conversion. How do we make sure that the correct person gets notified? We're going to let automation handle that for us. If we use things like workflow rules, we can go ahead and start cutting out some of the manual steps in our process, such as notifying someone else to do the conversion. This is something I see very often. Just because a sales rep sold a contract doesn't mean I want them creating the contract in Manage. This is where that handoff needs to happen. This allows the sales rep to simply update the status on their opportunity, and then here our workflow rule would come into play, and they'll go ahead and notify whoever is in charge of actually creating those new records. This is another place where classifying your opportunities is important. We need to make sure that the stage, status, and type are correct so we can use a workflow rule to notify the correct person based on that information. Now, the sales operations team would come into here and they would make the correct decisions on, okay, what needs to be created, where do these products need to go, and how does that creation actually happen? So now I would like you guys to walk through these steps and do a little conversion of yourselves. We're gonna have 2 quick activities back to back here as you guys walk through it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause this for about 5 minutes and then we will be right back. All right, I hope everyone was able to walk through the first 5 steps of our conversion and get that product added to their opportunity. And now you guys are going to move to the next step, which is adding another product, a different one, a different specific one for a specific reason. And then we're going to walk through the actual conversion of our opportunity and create a service ticket and see what happens to both those 2 products. And we'll talk about that in, I'm going to say 4 minutes when we come right back. All right, hello everyone. I hope you were able to finish that conversion. And when you got to step 6, you probably noticed the products tab of that service ticket only had 1 product. You had 2 in your opportunity, you converted them both over, but only one of them showed up on that products tab. And that's because of that product class I talked about earlier. One of our products, the super widget, I believe is a non-inventory class product, so that gets added over as a product on our service ticket. And the engineer fixed fee product was a service class ticket. And when we quoted for that, what we were really representing was the labor that's going to be associated to actually install that super widget that we sold. Well, when we converted that over to a service ticket, we don't use products to represent labor there. But since we know what we quoted it for, fixed fee, when you looked at the finance tab of that service ticket, you probably noticed it was set to bill at a fixed fee. And how we were able to do that is we used the information listed on that service class product. We took it off because we use the added information now, and then use that information to define exactly how much and how we want to bill for that service ticket. So, pop quiz for you guys. What can a 1 opportunity be converted into? Is that going to be A, a service ticket, B, a company, C, an agreement, or D, A and C? Let me know what you guys think. You guys are really quick with this one. That's what I like to see. And it is going to be D, A, and C. You can also convert to a sales order or a project. You cannot convert to a company. And as we wrap up here, I wanted to show you guys a couple resources you guys can take advantage of. First is going to be our Marketing and Sales Partner Kit. You can find that under this Education drop-down for the Partner Kit section. This is going to be a big collection of just useful information that all ties back to setting up a marketing and sales process for your company within ConnectWise Manage. So if you're looking for more information all in one spot, Partner Kits are the way to go. We also have a couple great webinars tied back to sales, so if you want to dive even deeper and get even more out of your sales module, I'd recommend checking out this Sales Sold It Now What webinar. We also have one called Marketing in ConnectWise Manage, Managing Sales, and Effective Sales Handoffs. So a lot of great content out there on our video library for you to take advantage of. We have a couple minutes left for final questions, and I saw at least 1 or 2 come in that I wanted to address while you guys think of any others. First question was, where can we find recordings of these sessions? If you guys take a look down below my face, there is a web links session. There's one in there that says ConnectWise Manage Certified Expert Forums. If you follow that link, it'll take you to our private forums for the certification, where we post these sessions at the end of each week. So you'll see our sessions, or actually Monday's sessions are there already, and today's sessions should be showing up tomorrow. And we'll be doing that for every day throughout the certification. You can find them all right there. You can also ask any questions you might have that you forgot to ask during the session. We'll be happy to answer them on the forums as well. And with that, we are out of time, and I see no other questions, so we're finishing right on the spot. So coming up next week, you guys can look forward to learning more about product and service essentials. I will see you guys then.